Today's story is titled, Am I the Entitled Karen? Last week, I was in a horrible car accident. A truck rolled through a stop and we couldn't avoid the collision. All of the airbags deployed and my daughter was traumatized. Fortunately, no one was injured and we all walked away. At work the next day, my boss learned I didn't get evaluated after and called me an idiot. She said with my luck I'll have a stroke or an aneurysm, and that's when my light bulb turned on. I have a clotting disorder, literally the opposite of hemophilia, and didn't even remember until she said that. Y'all are going to call me stupid and say this is fake because what kind of bimbo forgets they have a clotting disorder? But let me put it in perspective. I have type 1 diabetes that is a daily pain in my ass. I have a severe cinnamon allergy to the point that if I touch it, I have a moderate reaction for 24 to 36 hours, and if I ingest it, I'm miserable for 72 plus hours. I have general anxiety and PTSD, which means I work hard to maintain my mental health. Before my hysterectomy, my periods would have me completely doubled over in pain and unable to get out of bed. Pregnancy was not kind to me, and on top of learning I have an enzyme deficiency that renders anesthesia useless, C-section with full sensation, it also damaged the right side of my heart. I have constant back, neck to shoulder pain because I'm a very small woman with a G-cup chest. All this was well established before we learned only a few years ago about my factor VIII, so it's all very at the forefront of my conscience, but the anti-hemophilia tends to fade into the background until it becomes relevant. I messaged my doctor letting her know all the facts, that I'm fine, just a little banged up. Her nurse called me back and told me to go to the ER for a Doppler. Great. My community hospital is great. I love the doctors and they have won several awards for the care they provide. The ER? Well, I wouldn't trust them with the care of a cactus. They're wildly incompetent and unbelievably arrogant. I had to threaten a nurse with assault charges to get her to stop touching me without consent. I was accused of drug seeking because I asked for pain meds after a second-floor deck collapsed under me and I was in a wheelchair. My friend was roofied, and I told the nurses that she needed a tox screen. She was unconscious and vomiting. I was with her the entire night and she drank less than 4 drinks over a 5-hour time period. They deemed that not to be cost-effective and decided she needed a CT and a biblical lecture on making better choices. I'm a compliant patient and take my health very seriously, so I went to that god-awful ER. They had just finished my Doppler, and I told the tech that I needed juice, type 1 diabetic. She gave me the call button and told me a nurse would be in soon. I waited a few minutes and pressed the call button, explain I'm a diabetic with a low sugar and need juice, to which I get the incredibly helpful, okay. About 10 minutes later, I'm still sitting there juiceless. So I repeat the process. Button, explain, okay, another 5 minutes and in walks registration. I tell her that I need juice, and she walks out for a moment, then walks back in with a nurse. The nurse also has no juice. Where is the juice? Is there an evil warlock hoarding all of the juice? Did POTUS sign an exec order banning it? Juiceless. Nurse checks my blood sugar, and it is indeed low at 51 mg/Kel. And then she appears, my angel of salvation. She walks in with 4 Oz of orange juice. It's a start, but with the juice shortage, I'm willing to take what I can get while they quest for more. She makes sure I have the call button and tells me to press it if I need more. Spoiler alert, I needed more. I press the call button and repeat the process. Button, explain, okay, crickets. 5 minutes later, I try again, but this time, my call is ignored. 10 minutes later, I've had it. My vision is starting to distort, and I'm experienced enough to know that means the threat of seizure looms on the horizon. I try one last time to get help. It's like they rehearsed it. Everything played out exactly the same. So I put my shoes on, grab my purse, and leave. A nurse asks me all cheerful if I'm leaving, and I'm stumbling as I explain that I need juice or glucose or candy or whatever, and they refuse to help me. Her excuse? We're very busy, and all 5 nurses standing at the counter of the nurses' station nod in agreement. Then she says, what may be the shittiest statement possible in this situation? But you're welcome to leave. Excuse me? You, a medical professional, allegedly, want to send a diabetic seizure risk with documented low sugar away from a medical facility? I'm sorry, is there more to the juice shortage and you can't risk a possible leak? So I left. I drove home and chewed about 12 glucose tabs before my sugar normalized again. But now, in the light of frontal lobe health and the certainty of the juice shortage, I need to ask if I was the entitled Karen. The next story is titled, Entilted Father Demanded I Pay for the House He Bought for His Stepdaughter. This will be long. A few years ago, I posted about how my father cheated on my mother and how I retaliated to him financially and socially. This will serve as somewhat of an update, as there have been developments ever since. For those who go back and read that post, I have some good news. About 5 months after I posted my story, my cousin reached out. He had been fired from his job, but he had met a wonderful girl that really changed his perspective. Growing up, he's an only child, and his parents were rich enough he didn't need to care about school. While I and my sister thrived academically, he made no effort to even try to graduate from high school, as being a legacy meant that he would always have a place in the local plant, the one that's big enough to support our entire town. That was until he found out how his family was struggling financially. His mom had spent all their savings to keep an unnecessary lavish lifestyle, and the local plant, after 3 decades, decided to stop hiring people without a degree, or a trade, certificate, legacy, or not. My cousin was working as a bus operator at that time, but got let go and couldn't find a job, and that's when this girl changed his life. She pointed out how helplessly he was, being a golden child, not having to do anything growing up, and he listened to her. He reached out trying to make amends, and I and my sister accepted it. He went back to community college, got a degree, and started working at the plant last August. That's one relationship saved. At his wedding, my aunt also wanted to make amends. She had a falling out with my father, and perhaps her son had talked some senses into her, so she reached out and wanted to talk. Now we're much more reserved about this one, because we knew her antics so well, but she was quite genuine and understanding when we said we couldn't let her back into the grace as easily as her son. We went LC for a while. She's made efforts to be friendly to my niece and nephew, and never showed signs of any malicious intents. We're very much still keeping her on a short leash, but I want to believe that people can change, and so far she has not given me any reason to think otherwise. That's 2. The third is my grandmother. She's 85 this April. Among the grandchildren, I am the closest to her, so it pained me to have to go LC with her since our last interaction. She had also had a falling with my father because he was trying to get her to sign over her estate, maybe a story for another time, but she was having none of it, so they fought, and in the end he went AWOL. They did not see each other for a year until he showed up at my cousin's wedding. At said wedding, my father made an effort of avoiding me and my sister, but approached my BL to brag that he had bought a house that he and his mistress were living in. We did not think much of it at first because his pension is hefty. To those who read my previous post, even though it went down by 40%, it's still almost as much as double that of my aunt, so he can very much afford such a commodity. But then, after we're on talking terms, my aunt let it slip that he had to take a loan to pay for that. But his name is not in the deed. It's the oldest son of the mistresses instead. At this point, we figured that he's being scammed. But yeah, not our problem. Because of a series of incidents at my job, I was offered a much more secure and high-paying position. I will admit that this is truly an opportunity I thought I'd never have for at least another 3 years, but perhaps one can only have so much tragedies. With the raised salary, my mom's money from the divorce, and my sister help, I was able to put down a payment for a house for me and my mother, even though the housing market in my city was as crazy as ever. Even though I'm now eyeballs deep in debt, I'm proud of myself for having a house to my name. My father didn't contribute anything, and frankly, I didn't want to take anything even if he had asked. Around late November of last year, my childhood friend, with whom my cousin and I are very close, died from a car accident. It was very sudden. My cousin called me at 2 in the night, and before I knew it, I was home for his funeral. Needless to say, I was in a bad mental place in the days leading up to and following his funeral, so I decided to move back home until after Lunar New Year, which is 2 weeks away, to take care of my grandmother. But I was also hoping a change of scenery would do me some good. My mother stayed to look after the kids. My sister's house is literally within walking distance from mine, so she'll be fine. Days after said funeral, my father showed up at my doorstep. I was very much still grieving, so I was in no mood to play games. I shut down any effort at pleasantries and just stared at him while he mumbles about traveling or some shit. Then he told me that his mistress's second child, a girl, is attending college in my city next summer, and suggested we meet and be friends. I just laughed and told him to fuck off. That's when he brought up the house. Apparently, the precious little stepdaughter doesn't want to stay in a college housing campus, nor does she want to share an apartment with friends or other renters. She wants a whole house for herself, in the middle of the worst housing economy in our country's history. Of course, having taken a loan for the house he bought for his stepson, he could never afford buying a house in the capital city where prices go up by the hours. In an attempt to please his mistress, he came to me, asking for money. I kid you not. This man literally dropped my sister off in a foreign city and told her to fend for herself when she went to college the first time. And now he wanted to bend over backwards for a child that isn't even his, while asking for money from his son, who he loudly claimed that he'd rather see dead. I truly can't comprehend the gears in his head. Little did he know, he poked me at the worst moment possible. I was still grieving a lost friend. I ripped him a new one, detailing things I didn't even know where it came from. I was mentally checked out when my mouth did the work, and towards the end I cracked my voice a little. He tried to argue a bit, but after my aunt and cousin showed up, they live nearby, he bolted. That was last month, and I haven't heard from him since. Not that I care anyway. Work is busy, and I have Lunar New Year to prepare. I'll admit that encounter didn't do me any good. It stings. TBH, having your father prioritize a child that's not even his over his son and daughter. I've had sleepless nights over it, trying to think of a good reason, maybe something we did or something in his life that was so unsatisfying that he had to seek it elsewhere, and not within his own family. I've come to accept that even though I always say I'm over it, deep down I'm still hoping for a reunion, hoping that one day he will come to his senses and try to make amends. It's a long shot, but I hope for such a day. I'm not letting my guard down for 1 second, if anything. I'm more vindictive than ever, but I have hopes.